And we want to start by making sure that everything in red has been entered. So I'm going to put in a brand new employee profile. We're going to move on to the record details section, and we're going to assign that employee a code. So, of course, you'll want to just double check the codes that you're using for your existing employees and make sure whatever you choose is consistent. In my case, I'm using first initial last name as my unique code. You might be using a badge number or some other employee ID number. Next, under Group, we're going to choose the department or division that that individual belongs to, followed by their title. Over on the bottom right, we're going to select the or enter the seniority number for that employee. Now, when it comes to defining that seniority number, what I would recommend is, and in my case here, I have 26 employees, so I'm going to make my new employee 27. And that's just going to control or determine how that individual is listed on the schedule. So, of course, whenever we're looking at a schedule, the person with the highest rank is at the top of the screen, where, of course, we see our sergeant. And then below, we have our list of officers. So your most junior officer is going to be the one with the highest number in their seniority field. So really, your most junior officer should be at the bottom of any given shift. Okay. And in this case, Darren Coleman would be considered the most senior officer on the day shift. Now, there's a few other fields that, although they're not required within the employee profile, you're probably going to need them, and that's going to be your hire date and your accrual date. So, of course, the hire date is when that individual started working in our department. The accrual date is the date that we're using to determine how they are accruing time off. So for most of your new employees, the hire date and accrual dates should match. The only time they will not match is if you're hiring an officer from, maybe they were working in another department, and so maybe they have 3-4 years in that department. So even though they started working for you on the 8th of August of 2016, maybe they started on May 30th of 2010 in the department that they used to work in. So when it comes time to figuring out how much time they're accruing, what it's going to do is it's going to use this date. Okay, it's going to, according to this, that officer, although he's new in your department, for purposes of time off accrual, he's been here for 6 years, or that's how we are treating him, just for that purpose. Now up top you have a series of checkboxes. Most of these are self-explanatory. If you have part-time employees, civilian employees, just mark them as necessary. For officers, if you mark them on probation, you'll be able to use that information later on to block them from being able to sign up for overtime or extra duty job assignments. Okay, they might not be quite ready to start doing that sort of thing yet. If your department pays shift differential, even if this employee is not going to be working a night shift, if he or she is capable of working differential under the right conditions, make sure that that checkbox is marked. Next, we're going to move over to the Contact Information tab. Notice that I'm not saving in between the tabs. So under Contact Information, the fields that are most important to what we do here is the phone numbers. So the phone numbers we're going to use for call lists. Emails are going to be used for notifications for any time off or overtime entries that the individual submits. It will also be used to notify them of any schedule changes. So when you assign that person to a training class or to an extra duty job, if you reassign them to another squad, even if it's temporary, we want to make sure that we always send them an email letting them know of the change. Next, we have a text message address. Text messaging is going to be used for our overtime replacement policy. If you plan on using our system to notify individuals of possible overtime opportunities, you're going to be able to do that using the text message address. Now, when entering these addresses, we're going to suggest that you enter them using the MMS version of those addresses. So I believe Verizon uses something that looks like that, vzwpix.com. Okay, so we're not going to use the standard SMS address, which might be vtext.com. Okay, the reason why we're using the MMS format is because when we text message the details of overtime opportunities, we need the extra character length. We want to make sure that the link that we provide in that text message that people will be able to click on and accept the overtime with, we want to make sure that link is not cut off. Okay. Now, of course, you're free to enter contact information if you would like. Our system will not be using that, of course, for any scheduling purposes. But it could be information that you can extract through various reports if necessary. Now, if you recall, when you first entered your employees during the first online class, this is basically where we ended this. We saved our profile and we moved on and we just made sure everyone was in the system. Now that you're ready to take the next step and go live, there are a few more tabs that you have to complete for any new employees. So let's take a look at the Application tab. Under Validation Skill Sets, you're going to select which minimum staffing requirements skill set that employee can contribute towards. Now, you actually did this with all of your existing employees during your 6th online class. That's where you entered your minimum staffing requirements, you created your validation skill sets, and you assigned everyone to the appropriate skill set. Okay. You're not going to go through that entire process again once you get a new employee. Now you're just going to click on the Application tab and mark the appropriate skill sets. In the next section, you will be able to select overtime groups. Your overtime groups are going to be created if and when you attend the overtime replacement classes. And this just determines what types of overtime opportunities this individual can be contacted with. And this is primarily used by our open shifts. So if we have a staffing shortage on a night shift and we want to post that online and allow people to see those and sign up for those, they need to belong to the right overtime group in order to see that. And one possible application or example of that is You might be using open shifts for patrol overtime as well as communications overtime. So you might have people who could just work patrol, people who can just work communications, but you might also have some people who can work both. So you can belong to up to 4 of those overtime groups. Also covered during the advanced setup and training class for overtime replacement policies are the employee lists that people can belong to. Once you have established how many lists you're going to need to fit your department's needs, you'll need to make sure that every time you add a brand new employee, you have to select which list that they belong to. Now, you should only have to complete this step for brand new employees that are entered after you've already gone live with the system. When you attend the overtime replacement policy class, you will have the opportunity to assign both the overtime groups and the employee list en masse to everyone within your department. Very similar to what was done with the validation skill sets. We're ready to save. And now our new employee has been added into the system. And so let's close out of the employee profile screen, and we're going to move on to the pay info screen next. That's also found under the Employee Center category. From the left side, select your brand new employee, and starting at the very top, you want to make sure that the employee is assigned to the appropriate work group. Here again is another topic that was not covered early on during your basic setup. These are associated with the advanced setup and training classes that you may be in the process of attending now. Now, your work group is going to determine how that employee accrues time off, if and when they earn holiday pay. It's also going to control how payroll is processed for that individual, specifically how overtime is recalculated, if at all. Select the work group that the employee belongs to, and under the timesheet section, enter the payroll ID for that employee. Now, the payroll ID will be used when creating timesheets and eventually generating a payroll export. And the purpose of this is, since the payroll system does not recognize the employee as Bill Smith, but recognizes them usually using some sort of numeric value, this is how we tie the individual to that number. So anytime we generate a payroll export or anything that will get directly imported into a payroll system, we will always use this payroll ID number to identify, in this case, Bill Smith. Next, we're going to take a look at standard hours scheduled per pay period. Now, this number is used when calculating pay rates, and really for little else. So, of course, you might have people on rotating schedules. They may not necessarily be working 80 hours every pay period, but for the purposes of their salary and their checks, they're probably they're paid based on an 80-hour, 14-day schedule. And you might have certain civilian employees where this might be 70 or 75. And we're going to refer to that field in a moment when we move on to the next tab, but we do have one more field that we may need to complete, and that's under lunch times. If you have someone who receives unpaid lunch time, make sure to enter that time into that field, whether it's 30 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever it might be. So for those that work, let's say an 8 to 4 schedule, an 8-hour shift, they might only be paid 7 hours for that. So when those folks take time off, we want to make sure that we're not deducting them 8 hours for the entire shift. We want to deduct them time based on what they're actually paid for. Next, we're going to click on the Pay Rates tab, and we're going to enter our employee's annual salary. And as we type that in, you'll notice that it is recalculating all of the fields automatically for us based on 80 hours per 2-week cycles. Now, of course, you can override any one of these if you need to. However, generally speaking, you shouldn't have to do this. Now, keep in mind that the pay rates are only going to be used for internal reports. When it comes time to generate any payroll exports, normally we use activity, whether it's time off, overtime activity, or regular hours, and the payroll system is the system of record when it comes to the actual salary information. Next, enter the effective date and add that to your salary history. And from this point forward, once employees receive pay increases, you can simply just change the annual salary, but always be sure to add an effective date and add that to the salary history, which will then be summarized for you on the final tab. Let's save our work, and let's close out. All right, so now that we have our employee profile added and we have their pay information and their workgroup affiliation assigned, the next step is to create a user profile so that that individual can log on and start using the system. Before we take a look at that screen, I'd just like to take a moment to pause and are there any questions with what we have covered so far?
No, so far
and
I'm good.
For us, we have the live mic.
No, I'm good so far, sir.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a look at one more screen under the Employee Center before we move on to adding this individual to the schedule. And that screen is called User Profile. So in basic setup class number 7, you probably created logins and passwords for the entire department at once. However, as you enter new employees, you're not going to repeat that process. You're just going to create an individual login for each person as they need one. So using our new employee, Bill Smith, we will click on the new button up top, and we're going to enter the username. And again, you're just going to want to reference the usernames that are being utilized by everyone else in the department. I'm going to enter the full name. And I'm going to choose a temporary password. Now, the system, when using the mass mass user profile function, uses first initial, last name with an 8-character limit. So just for the purposes of remaining consistent here, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm just going to use first initial, last name, B. Smith, for their password. And I'll enter that in one more time. We're going to move on to the next section in red, and we're going to select the employee that that user profile is for. So this is how it matches up the user credentials you just created to a valid employee profile. We're going to skip security level, and we're going to move on to security profile. Using the drop-down menu, select what type of user this is. For our purposes, this is just a basic user. I'll go ahead and select that from the drop-down menu. Now, just a couple fields that we're not covering at this time, but just so you know what they do. Under Default Tile Profile, this is the dashboard profile, which I'm currently circling over. This is the default tile profile that that employee will have access to when they log on to the desktop application. Since I am creating a basic user, they will be logging on to the web portal for all of their scheduling needs, so they won't need access to a tile profile. If, however, I was creating a supervisor or an administrator, that might be another story. But for now, we'll stick with our user. Under security level, which is in red, is actually not required for the latest and greatest version of our scheduling system. This is just for those folks that are on our legacy application, so you'll just want to make sure that you ignore it. If you end up selecting something, you're not going to hurt anything, but the security profile, the one below it, is the one that will determine what this person can do once they have logged into the system. Under number of past days to allow update, you're going to tell the system how many days back this individual can go in and enter a overtime or time off entry. And so because it's a basic user, I wouldn't consider going beyond 7 or 14 days. If someone works overtime at the end of their shift, we want to make sure that we encourage them to put their entry in as soon as possible. 7 will allow them to go back 7 days on a schedule and enter an overtime or a time off entry. Now, for your supervisors, you may want to provide a little bit more room. Perhaps 30 days might be acceptable. And your administrators, we would recommend setting that to 365. Essentially, no restrictions on how far back they can go in the schedule and apply time off or overtime, especially if they're doing it on behalf of others. We're going to recommend that you force your brand new user to change the password the next time they log on to the web portal. Now, I'd also like to add there's a checkbox here for web account locked. Now, you may be using this screen or this checkbox, especially early on during your rollout. And what will happen is people are just going to forget their passwords. And they're going to try and try and try again until they're eventually locked out of the system. In which case, they will have to contact a system administrator within your organization. Once you have entered this screen and selected on the person who has been locked out, you'll notice that the web account lock checkbox is marked. You just have to unmark it, and we would recommend changing their password. 1234 would be just fine. And then, of course, they would have to change their password the next time they log on to the system. Now, you will not have the ability of retrieving their existing password. You will only have the ability to give them a brand new one. Let's move on to web settings. And the only field we need to worry about here is the web dashboard drop-down menu. Now, since we are entering a basic user and they will be using the web portal, we can choose what their default web dashboard will be. Now, you may only have one. That's perfectly fine. But if you have multiple web dashboards, maybe one for communications, one for patrol, one for the detective bureau, just select the one that should be defaulted for this new employee. Now, that doesn't mean they won't be able to view others. It simply means that will be the default when they log on. Okay, we're done here, so let's click on the Save button up top, and let's close it out. Now, before we leave the Employee Center completely, I just wanted to point out a handy screen here called Quick Employee Information Update. So from this screen, we have the ability to change various field values for our employees, things that are found within their employee profiles. And so once I select my people, over on the right, I can select what it is I want to change. For instance, work groups. Right? You can always assign the work group by each individual employee profile. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Or you can look at them for the entire department. And so if someone is not in the right work group, simply highlight their name, select the right work group over to the right, and then click on the green arrow in the middle. You can hold down the control button to select multiple values or multiple employees and change multiple values. And once you're done, click on the Save button. Now, this screen can also be used just to reassign groups. So once again, these are things that reside within each employee's profile, but if you need to change several employees at once, instead of going through each individual profile, making the change, saving the change, you can just use this screen. It might save you a little time.
That'll probably be beneficial for us because we change squads every year, so rather than going back into each one individually, I can select them all here and just change whatever group they're going to. So the rotation remains the same, but they're going to change, squads that I have them set to.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Nice.
Let's close that out. And so now that we have our employee profile entered, the pay rate information entered along with the work group assignment, and we now have a login and password they can access the system with, and now it's time to actually get them onto the schedule. So for that, we're going to switch over to the Build Schedule menu. And we're going to select Add Employees to Existing Rotation. So this screen was covered during your 5th online basic setup class. So now you see we're starting to take a lot of these screens that you covered sort of in a kind of scattershot kind of way, and now we're just sort of reining it into hopefully a simple to follow process. Now, up top, you're going to select the date range for when you want to place the person onto the schedule. So this is their start date, and this is the end date. By default, this is always going to be set to today's date, both the from and the to. So you make sure you change that, because if you don't, you're basically assigning that person to the schedule for one day.
Mm-hmm.
Next, select your brand new employee. And click Select and Close. And over to the right, select their schedule rotation. And while you have any portion of that employee highlighted on the left, just click on the green arrow and you'll see the new rotation code and rotation description populate those last columns. Now, you do have the option to adjust their start and end time. So if for some reason they work a slightly different set of hours from everyone else on that schedule, you can certainly change that here. Otherwise, you can click on the Apply button. Now, depending on how far out you're building the schedule for the person or however many people you're assigning at once, that can all determine the amount of time this step is going to take to complete. Once it's done, it'll let you know that the person is now on the schedule, and depending on where this squad A falls, we should see our new employee on the schedule eventually. And he's on there somewhere. Now, while we're in this screen, because, you know, the name of the class is Managing Employees, aside from just adding a new employee, you're going to be faced with having to extend your schedules or move people around from year to year. So you're still going to use this screen to build schedules for the following year. You're just going to select the employees, and I'll just select all 27 of mine. It's a fairly small department. And up top, you're going to adjust the dates for the new year that you want to build. In this case, I'm going to build this from January 1st to December 31st of 2017. Now, unless I make any new assignments, everyone is just going to carry on with whatever schedule rotation they were on in 2016. So it keeps that information in their profile and just calls it back up. So you can choose to either extend your schedules for another year, or you can highlight individuals and place them on different rotations. So maybe you have people moving from Squad A to Squad B, Squad C to Squad B, whatever it might be. And in fact, you just mentioned it. You can switch everyone's group assignment on the Quick Employee Information Update screen. I would actually do that first.
Mm-hmm.
And then enter this screen, bring everyone up, and then assign them to their new schedule rotations. Right? Because the first thing you did just affected their group assignment.
Right.
Right? Now they actually have to go on to a new schedule. So all you have to do is click on the individual and place them on their new rotation, And anyone else that you don't change is simply continuing on with whatever they've been on.
Francisco, I'm sorry. I just got a text about coming out to a scene. Do you can I leave and attend this class another time?
Absolutely.
Okay. You know, I look forward to your email, and then, like I said, I'm sure I'll be talking to you sooner or later again.
That's true. We can always cover some of this next week.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You got it. Take care.